Hi everyone and welcome to my ranking of the Terrence Malick films. Now this is going to be a ranking of all 8 of the films that I've reviewed. It's not including, Voyage of Time, because that is a documentary and I've not reviewed that yet. But if you've, seen my reviews on my channel, I've been doing a director series. You can get, a rough order of what I would, of this how this list would go, and I'll leave a link to that playlist in the description. So check that out first if you want to see that before this actual ranking, but of course if you have seen the reviews, you can get a rough idea. But this is going to be, as I say, least favourite to favourite. So despite some of them being maybe high scores, it's not always going to be about that critical score. It's about my favourite, but it's roughly the same of what I've of how I've rated them as such. But yes, Terrence Malick is one of my absolute favourite filmmakers of all time. Even though there's 2 films, the number 8 and 7, which I'll talk about in a minute, which I do not like. The rest of his films I do like, and his top 4 films are some of my absolute favourites of all time. They're on my favourite films list, and all in my top 200. The top 2 films are in my top 40, and in one, number 1 in particular is, well, you'll see when I talk about it. But first up is To the Wonder. In 2012. Now this came out a year after The Tree of Life, and a big step down for Malick. It is actually a bad film, I think, and I really did not like this film at all. It's just one of the main things is it's so experimental, and it just seems like a really poor student film, and that's not Terrence Malick. Coming off of The Tree of Life, which certainly was not did not feel like a student film, but it's just everything. Nothing works really. You've got some good visuals in there, and at times some good music, but really it's pretentious. It's random. It's quite it's just full of unlikable characters. The romance I could not connect with, and Ben Affleck, one of the most boring protagonists I've seen in a while. And just nothing really works. Olga Kurilenko, as she gives some good scenes and stuff, but really there's no. I just never knew where this film was going. I don't even think Malick really knew. It was very experimental, and just something that really angered me. I could never connect to on any level really, and it just didn't work. And it's weird to think that a romance like this by Malick failed when he's made films like Days of Heaven and Badlands. Which we'll get to. But yes, To the Wonder at number 8. Now at I haven't got number 7 on Blu-ray, but it is Knight of Cups. I thought this was a weak film, not quite bad. To the Wonder's the Malick film I think is generally bad, but Knight of Cups I think was a weak film. Again, it felt very experimental. This phase 2 of Malick, from To the Wonder to Song, all these, they feel. It's this experimental stage, and they're just complete. Overall, it's a lot weaker than his first 5 films. If you talk about them, it is very separate. Knight of Cups it's a bit better. It is better than To the Wonder, purely because there is some stuff that works. Christian Bale, though, again, boring protagonist because he's been told to just told to walk through, to no avail really. Most of the time, the film is just him, walking, going to parties and stuff. Bizarre. Once again, it's just bizarre, and it is really random, and the narrative is so unfocused until some of the second half. It does pick up a little bit, and that's why it's not quite bad. Some stuff does happen that's kind of compelling, and some of the visuals, in the second half, when he's away from LA a bit more, are quite nice. You've got some okay music, but really. For the most part, it's not that great standout, and Malick is usually great at using music in his films, but and it's just again pretentious, random ramblings. The narrations in this film I don't think worked. You did have some kind of good scenes scattered throughout. Certainly in the second half, Brian Dennehy and of course there's kind of giving some emotion, but really as a whole film. It's weak, and it's my 7th favourite Malick. So these next 2 films were very close. I gave them the same rating, so you'll probably know if you've seen them. my reviews, what they are, but I gave them the same rating, and I thought they were just under average. I did like these two, you know, all these films from now on I do like from Malick, and the top four I absolutely love. These next two I do like, they were slightly under average films. But yes, this next one, it has to be The New World. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, the last sort of hour of this film, I do prefer to all of this next film that I'm going to be talking about, you know, number 5. The ones that are close, and, you know, I did connect to a lot more than all of this, you know, the number 5 film. But generally, the first 2 hours of The New World, in particular the first, you know, first hour, it just, I can't see myself, you know, feeling that great about when I rewatch it, which of course I will at some point. Rewatching it, you know, it will be hard because it was just, for me, you know, quite random and pretentious, and I just didn't connect to it. You know, it's got great visuals and everything, and the score by James Horner throughout this film is wonderful. You know, not a lot of it is actually utilised. You know, a lot of it was cut out, but when it is there, it's stunning. And you know, the actual pieces of classical music injected in were really great. The visuals throughout was stunning, of course. The editing did mess up some of that, and that's another thing. You know, the editing, the directing in this film for the first hour and a half, 2 hours. And I watched the extended cut. You know, it's just not good for me. And there was a lot of bizarre stuff going on. You know, it kind of angered me at times, and I just you know, it was a romance really that the Colin Farrell and, you know, Kurienka Filcher, you know, they just didn't have that much chemistry really. It was only really till Christian Bale came into it at the 2 hour mark, you know, on the extended cut, that I really actually started to care for the film properly, and did really like, you know. But as a whole, you know, I think I'd rather take the number 5 pick that I've got over this. And it's just, it's great visuals and a great score and everything. And I did really like the last hour or so. But I have to take everything into account. For me, it is an under average film, and it is a like, but just a like. And The New World, at number 6. Song to Song is next. I don't have the Blu-ray of this, but you know, I have seen it, and Song to Song, I think it's definitely the best of the Phase 2 Malicks, and it's kind of fitting because, you know, he dipped massively to The Wonder, and he's kind of just gotten gradually better each time with these 3. Still, you know, they're not worthy of Malick, but this is the one that I do actually like, and I didn't think that, you know, I thought I'd hate it because many have called it the worst Malick film. You know, Mark Kermode famously has put it on his top 10 worst of that year, and I just thought it would be, you know, the worst Malick. I did think after watching it to The Wonder that it'd be hard to top that for me not liking it, but yeah, it was actually a bit of a pleasant surprise, this one. It, although, you know, it's still slightly under average film for me. I gave it the same rating as The New World overall. It does throughout, you know, from start to finish. I do connect with it more, and I do like Ryan Gosling as the lead. And it is more consistent, although it's still, you know, got scenes that are really good scenes that are followed by, you know, stuff that is pretentious and bizarre. But throughout the film, you know, if you judge it on acts and just from start to finish, I did connect with it more. I did like the romance more overall with Rooney Mara. I didn't like Michael Fassbender, and, you know, it's got loads of flaws, this film. It's still experimental a lot of the time. But as a whole, it does work to an extent, and I did like quite a lot of it. A lot of it I did, you know, some of it I did really detest, and it's just, you know, there was a lot of bizarre, pretentious stuff and things that really annoyed me. But, you know, I did overall prefer this film to The New World, and I could watch it again and just enjoy it more, you know, from start to finish. And it was a bit of a pleasant surprise. On its own, you know, it's not really, this isn't worthy of Terrence Malick. But I did prefer, I think, to The New World slightly. But yeah, Song to Song at number 5. Now we move on to the Malicks that I adore. Now I gave this film, number 4, I gave this film a higher rating than my number 3, because I think it's not got the flaws that number 3 has. And really, this is a flawless film for me. One of the best war films of all time, The Thin Red Line. I absolutely love this film, and it's stunning. I just recently rewatched it again, and it's a masterpiece. It's a war poem, and You know, it came out the same year as Saving Private Ryan. Very, very different. In some ways, it is better, I think. You know, overall, I probably still prefer Saving Private Ryan, but you know, it's got some of the best cinematography you ever see. The score by Hans Zimmer is one of the best in film, and you know, it's just from start to finish for me, it's perfection. Really, I connected with everything that's going on. It moved me, you know, so much. Wonderful performances. Although this is, you know, an ensemble, as I've said in my review, it's not really an ensemble. Whereas there's not really standout star performances, if you know what I mean. It's just they're all part of this narrative, weaved in to the environment, you could say, as I've said, and just the way that the score is used throughout the film is this a masterpiece, really. There's not really a flaw with this film. The first 20 minutes, you know, it's nowhere near as good as the rest of the film, but I still loved it, and you know, I couldn't find flaws with it. You know, it's one of the most spiritual films I've ever seen, and it's just the middle segments actually some of the best stuff I've ever seen in cinema. It's mind blowing, you know, and you know, it's just, it ends on such a spiritual note as well. The final act is also wonderful, and just overall from start to finish, this is a mind blowing film that when I first saw it back in January, I couldn't quite believe it. You know, Malick had done it again. He created a masterpiece, and it is stunning. You know, it's a wonderful film. I gave it my full marks, and it's easily in my top 200 films. Remain there for, you know, quite some time. The Thin Red Line, a masterpiece of cinema. Now, next up is a film which I gave a slightly less score than this to The Thin Red Line, sorry, but I do overall, you know, connect with this film more. And I think just really, this only had a flawed ending, 10 minutes for me. That's the only flaws really for me. It could have ended a lot better. It was a bit, yeah, it was a bit falling into that pretentious, you know, the ending, 10 minutes, the heavy-handedness a bit, and I'm not a fan of Sean Penn in this film, and the stuff where he came in at the end with, it just didn't quite, I had to dock a mark off. I gave it a 99% though, and it's in my top 150. You know, it's not quite perfect, but The Tree of Life is just an absolute masterpiece of cinema for me, and you know, if it weren't for that flawed ending, this would, you know, it's still basically, before that ending 10 minutes, this is one of the best films of the century really for me, and it's just so ambitious. The execution, you know, the universe sequences are stunning, the practical effects, yeah, the CGI dinosaur bit, you know, it's a bit, but as a whole, that whole universe bit is some of the best we've ever seen in film. And you know, it's just absolutely mind blowing, and it's got perfect placement really within the narrative. And then you see, you know, just the birth of the human. It's just so wonderful. It ties in so much, and in the themes of just life and death, and you know, creation and stuff. But all the performances in this film, you know, Jessica Chastain, she's wonderful in this film. Brad Pitt, you know, I've heard people say it's his best performance. I don't quite think that, but it's probably his second best for me, and he's just absolutely brilliant in this film. The contrast, you know, between them two performances, and then you've got the children who are played wonderfully, but the way Malick captures childhood is just really on another level. Only a couple of films have actually done it better than this, I believe, because it's just so true, so magical, you know, and the way it's shot is stunning. The kind of choppy editing works in this film actually quite remarkably, to just give it, you know, a more spontaneous effect. You know, it's like it's in the moment. But yeah, it's just absolutely stunning. Everything involved. I connect with it so much, you know, and it just it covers, you know, just life. So much ground this covers. You know, the scope is massive. But it's always so personal. Apart from that last 10 minutes, I think it loses it loses actual emotional connection for me, and it is a bit showy and stuff. And yeah, it's a bit pretentious. But you know, this film, The Tree of Life, really just it blew me away. This is on my rewatch, and it's just wonderful. You know, it's just so wonderful. I connect with it on so many levels, and yeah, just almost perfect. If it wasn't for that last sort of 10 minutes, it would have been full marks from me. But it's still a masterpiece, you know, I think, and wonderful film. Really, such a wonderful film, and very different, of course, for Malick. You know. Now we come into my top 2 films of Terrence Malick. These are both my top 40, and you know, if you've seen my reviews, of course, you'll know what they are and the ordering probably. I gave them the same rating. These got my highest rating, and you know, for me they are beyond perfection, you know, in cinema, and I can't find flaws. They both go beyond that though. They're just films that are so mind blowing. Number 2 is Badlands. Now this is an absolute masterpiece. I saw this after my number 1 pick, and it's just, once again, the two 70s films, you know, of course, as you know, yeah, for me are the best Malick films, and he's never really come anywhere close for me to these two films, as much as Tree of Life and Thin Red Line, you know, how mind-blowing they are and how, you know, perfect the Thin Red Line is really and stuff. These two films, though, for me, the top two films are the masterpiece, the true masterpieces. You know, the absolute some of the magnum opuses of cinema for me. And Badlands, you know, it's just absolutely stunning. Martin Sheen, Sissy Spacek, wonderful. You know, just everything in this film. It just draws you into this dreamlike kind of world and this narrative. It's very, very loose narrative, which is so hard to actually achieve, you know, when you think about it. But it's so engaging, completely compelling, you know, straight away just drawn into this. The narration is some of the best in film. It's just such a wonderful film, you know. It's realistic, but it's also dreamlike. Malick basically blends the what for me a director can do best is, you know, when the best films, you know, when I talk about the best films ever made, the ones right at the top of the list are the ones that for me blend like this fantasy and reality together perfectly. And that's really what cinema is when it's at its best, because, you know, it's got these grounded themes, these characters, but then it can elevate you, and it can use visuals and editing like this film does, music, to just kind of elevate you and try and put you in a trance, and that's what this film does. And I just wish it was longer, you know, but it's an absolute masterpiece of cinema, and really something that's just so emotional for me. I connect with it on every level, and it's one of the best films ever made for me. But there is another Malick, of course, and this is not one that really appears at the top too much now, but for me it is by far the best Malick film, and it's in my top 20 films of all time, and you know, it's up there, you know, not far off of The Godfather 1 and 2 for me. You know, that's how good this film is. It's got some of the top 10 cinematography in film, and, you know, it's Days of Heaven, and it's quite, you know, as I say, not a lot of top of people's lists of Malick films. For me, it's by far his best. He's never really come close to this. Even Badlands, this is far better than Badlands for me personally. This film, you know, it makes me so emotional throughout the entire film. It's one of the best, one of the top 5 romances in film. This love triangle, you know, between Richard Gere, of course, Brooke Adams, and Sam Shepard. It is a masterful construction of a love triangle. And then you've got Linda Mance, who just plays one of the most complex and mysterious characters in cinema, and she narrates it, and it's got the second best narration in film for me, just behind A Clockwork Orange, really. It's just such a wonderful film. It's beautiful, you know, in terms of, you know, how it looks, the visuals, and the music by Ennio Morricone. It's one of the, for me, the top probably 10 film scores of all time. You know, I think it's the second best Morricone score, and just the way that this film puts me in a trance, it makes me, you know, lose track of time completely. All my senses are just altered to a way that you know, Malick is just able to make me be part of this film, and, you know, I just connect with the romance so much. It moves me so much, and just the trio of these characters, you know, the way that they're just on this adventure from the beginning until the very end, you know, it's just so wonderful and uplifting. The characters are some of the best in cinema for me, better than Badlands even. I think Richard Gere gives one of the best performances of all time, and Sam Shepard, you know, all the people involved in this, it's just wonderful. The editing is some of the best in film. The way he's able to kind of just extend time and play with it, and all the fades, the gradual fades, the way it's shot, you know, the magic hour, it's just all so perfect, but it's beyond the checklist, you know, film, as I've said before. It just goes way beyond what you could imagine what a film could be. It's just such an experience, and, you know, I think about it all the time, and it's just the one for me that is by far the best Malick film. Days of Heaven, one of the magnum opuses of cinema, and in my top 20. And you know, I don't think Malick will ever come close to this. He probably won't even come close to Badlands, but you know, this is the one that, for me, really, it's one of the best love stories of the century, and one of the absolute finest films ever made, for me. Days of Heaven. So yes, thanks for watching my ranking of Terrence Malick films. Of course, again, if you want to, you know, of course, see the actual reviews individually, I'll leave a link to the playlist, as I've said. But yeah, this is a video just so it's all in the one place. And as well, just to conclude, Malick, you know, one of the top 15 directors of all time for me. You know, because most directors have made some films that aren't great. You know, and To the Wonder's the only one I think is generally bad. But when he's working at his best, for me, Terrence Malick is almost unrivaled, and especially Badlands and Days of Heaven. You know, it's hard to top them films. There's not many films that have come close to Days of Heaven for me, especially. And you know, he's so genius. The way he just, you know, they're not always traditional narratives, but when he's, you know, he's at his best, they're just so unique in all the best ways, you know. And I just connect with them so much, and I think he just knows how to elevate so much, you know. And he's so unique, and just the spree, especially the first 3 films he made, you know, all in a row, really flawless. And The Tree of Life is just so mind blowing. Yeah, just Terrence Malick, one of my absolute favourite directors, and I can't wait for Raid Gun. It's meant to be a return to, you know, his more traditional stuff, so I really look forward to that. But for now, I just have these films to watch over and over, the ones that I love anyway. And yeah, thanks for watching my ranking of the Terrence Malick films.